Mrs. Happy Catholic here, seeking to bring you authenticity, perspective, and connectedness. Welcome. Hello, I'm Mrs. Happy Catholic, and welcome to my channel. I'm excited because I finally got to interview Gary Campbell, who is a laicized priest, formerly of the Society of St. Pius X, who hails from Australia. And he and I were able to record an interview the other day. We had a little glitch getting started. I didn't tell him I was going to start asking questions yet. So he was explaining about converting from atheism as a young adult to the Catholic Church, and then how he found traditionalism. So kind of in the discovery from atheism to Catholicism part. We're going to jump right into the middle of that in just a second, and you can hear his stories and his reflections. And I just thought he shared so humbly and sincerely, and is just a delightful man. And I'm very grateful for his time and for being able to introduce him to you. And he's also possibly going to collaborate with us a little more on tradrecovery.com, and has posted one blog article there already. So I encourage you to go check that out and to say a prayer for Gary Campbell. And thank you for watching. God bless you.
Skimmed it over because of that that prejudice that Catholics are backward, they're against progress, they're against freedom, and all the rest of it. And well, as you know, it's a very Protestant thing. It's something that we've picked up from Protestant culture. But something about it just kept on resonating with me, and it's traditions. It's like we're talking about traditions. You've got your website for traditionalists, and the idea that the church's beliefs and rituals and so forth just continue throughout the ages without changing, or without changing very much. And somehow that appealed to me, that desire to have an anchor in my life. But still, I was fighting these prejudices. And first of all, I dabbled with an organization called the Liberal Catholic Church, liberal with a big L. And that was an organization which has all the rituals of the church, but they allow freedom of thought. And that was a breakaway from the Catholic Church in the 19th century, I believe. And they originally were an offshoot of the old Catholics, the Catholics who broke away from Rome at the First Vatican Council.
Right.
And then I came to realize that they didn't have enough depth for me. So I kept on reading, I kept on researching, and I started speaking to priests. And it was only it took me a couple of years for me to actually take the leap and convert and be confirmed. That was when I was 23. That was in the 80s. And probably heard of an expression that a convert never really stops looking. Once he's found something, he wants to explore as much of it as he can, which is good, which can also be kind of dangerous, which it was for me. This was in the 80s, and it was the time when there was still a lot of experimentation. Things like clown masses, liturgical dancing, bishops ordaining women, and these kinds of things. And when I became aware of that, I couldn't understand it.
Mm.
And I became quite concerned about that. And it was that time too that the Latin Mass came to the town where I was staying, which was Adelaide in South Australia. And that was the indult Mass that John Paul II had allowed to stop people becoming schismatics. Hindsight, it didn't really work, did it? But anyway, I became involved in that, and I fell in love with it, as you and many others could relate. The mystical aura of the Mass, that it was in a language that you couldn't understand, but you could tell something really special was going on. And priest with the back to the people and all that, strange vestments, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And so I started going to that more and more, but still going to the parish Mass. And then I got introduced to the Society of St. Pius X, and I was told that they were holding a retreat. And they have a 7-day version of the 30 days Ignatian retreat, spiritual exercises of Saint Ignatius. Well, they call it that, but it's a bad copy anyway. I said, okay, I'll go along and find out some more about the society. And then that got me convinced that the society was the only group who was actually doing something to fight these liberals and progressives that seemed, to my mind, to be trying to undermine the church. Excuse me. I'd call it a brainwashing, because what those exercises have done. Have you done one?
No, I haven't. I have a friend who is going to do it recently, though. I wondered about him. Oh,
because what they do is they basically flatten your soul and rebuild it the way they want. Because the first few days starts off about a meditation on sin, the horror of sin, and then on the consequences of sin, on hell. And they really put a lot of effort in describing what they think is hell is like. And it's all like, you're going to go there. And it can be quite, it can be very scary. And it can be, as I say, soul crushing. Because if you're convinced that you're terrible, you're at the bottom of the pile, you should be cast into hell, then they can, as I say, they can build you up in any way that they wish. And at the end of it, there's excuse me, and within it too, there's a general confession, which contributes to the same thing. But anyway, I left there on a big high, because I thought I had found my way. And then I left the my parish masses entirely and started going to the traditional Latin Mass. Then, not soon after, I wanted to become a priest. I had wanted to become a priest as soon as I converted, but the priest who was instructing me said quite wisely, "Good thought, but hang on there. You've just become a Catholic." But the society priest had no such compunction, and they said, "Come on, fine, we'll take you." And that was in the Society Seminary in New South Wales, Goulburn, New South Wales, and I spent 3 years there. And that for my philosophy formation, and then for the theology formation, I went to the United States, to Winona, Minnesota. And after I'd finished that training, I was posted to New Zealand, a lovely town called Wanganui in New Zealand. And I was there for 5 years. It was during the last year that I was there. We're talking about 1998, 99 now. That's when I started entertaining my doubts.
Who ordained you, may I ask? Which bishop?
Oh yeah, it was Bishop Fillet, Bernard Fillet. But Richard Williamson was my rector.
Okay. All right. I know a couple other guys that were in the seminary under him. Yeah. So
he was not bod.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
Yes. Oh, every conference and every sermon, it was about the Jews, Jews, Jews.
Yep, heard that too.
Yes. Anyway, my doubts began because of the society started spruiking something they called the Canonical Commission of St. Charles Borromeo. You see, the big problem the society has, and it knows it, is separate from the bishops and the Pope. It has no jurisdiction. And they didn't claim any jurisdiction. They said their popes don't have actually powers to govern churches. All they do is ordain and give the sacraments. But then they invented this canonical commission, which was claiming for itself the right to exercise jurisdiction, because they said you couldn't go to the Pope or the bishops, which was rubbish, first of all, because I remember when I was the only marriage I performed, the only marriage I witnessed, rather, was a legal marriage, because I wrote to the local bishop and said, please, can you give me permission to marry these two people? And he said yes.
Wow.
I don't know why the others couldn't have done that, but so yes, so this canonical commission was giving members of the society powers to dispense from marriage impediments, to dispense from religious vows, to excommunicate people, to lift excommunications. It had authority to judge on the validity of marriages. And anybody who wanted an annulment or wanted to see if they could get an annulment, they were told not to go to their local bishops, because they're modernist and only rely on the society priests and wait on their decisions. And I thought, well, this isn't right, because the society's been telling me all this time that their bishops aren't claiming jurisdiction. So that got me thinking, started getting me thinking, is the society really in schismatic state? And I, by letter, I challenged Bishop Tissier de Malaray on this, because he was the president of the Canonical Commission. He, of course, recently died, God rest his soul. And his response was to tell me, well, the Archbishop said it was okay, so it's okay. And then he told my district superior, based in Sydney, and he told my immediate superior in New Zealand that I was having these doubts. So immediately they were closing ranks, and they were putting pressure on me, which upset me because I thought I was expressing a private doubt of conscience.
Right.
Then they started planning to have me removed to another place where I wouldn't cause trouble, and keeping a close eye on me, etc., etc., etc. So I just kept quiet and kept on praying, kept on studying. I came across a study by the Society of St. Peter. I forget how I got it. I think it just appeared in the mail, because I think it must have gotten about somehow that there was a priest of the society in New Zealand expressing doubts. Anyway, I got hold of this study, and that was interesting, and that helped convince me that the society was in fact in Chisholm. And that for me was the first consideration. It was the first doubt. I mean, the doctrinal aspects, Vatican II and all that didn't concern me so much, because I know I would resolve all those questions, which I did eventually. So it got to one stage when I realized if I went into the chapel church and said Mass the next morning, I would be raising altar against altar, which of course is the title of this wonderful book, which I keep reading constantly. It's just so good. I just had to say.
That's awesome.
And I left, and I suppose rather spectacularly too. It was the most exciting thing I'd ever done. Without telling anybody, which sounds a bit cruel, but all the priests who knew about this problem had all closed against me anyway. So it was extremely difficult to confront. So I just left. And what I did, I remember it now, as I say, it's the most exciting thing I've ever done. On my maid, it was about 5 o'clock in the morning, I believe it was. Dark. And I on my bed I laid all the credit cards that I was using in the name of the society, all the cash and everything that belonged to them, and I slung a little knapsack on. I was wearing civvies, this awful jumper and trousers. That's all and a few books, my breviary, and that was about it. And then I opened the window. It's on the first floor. And just went out of the window and walked just outside of the town. It's not a very big town. And hitched a lift to Auckland, which is way up the top on the North Island of New Zealand, where there was a priest friend I knew who said, anytime you need some help, just let me know. So I sent ahead to him that I was coming. Just got on a coach and went there. But he helped me, be reconciled to the church, got in touch with the Roman department, had the excommunication lifted, and all that. His bishop, he offered to incardinate me, to have him one of his own clergy, but said I wanted to go back to Adelaide, and I spoke to my own bishop there. And after a while, I said, look, I don't think I want to continue in the priesthood. And there was a few reasons for that. At the time, like I say, I had just been a convert, and then straight away I wanted to become a priest. I just wasn't ready. And since then, I've kept on thinking of the issue and kept on thinking. And I still maintain it was the right decision to do. I'm very comfortable with that. Because I see some wonderful priests, and I'm thinking, I could not do what you're doing. It's just absolutely wonderful what they're doing.
Oh man!
But I still like to write and do what I can, and I think your website is wonderful. I mean, glad it's happened. It's a wonder it hasn't happened before, because a lot has changed in that space since I left. Because when I left, traditionalism was still a very fringe movement. When I came out, I started talking about the Society of St. Pius X, and they said, "What? Never heard of them. Priests."
Wow.
And
Okay.
and the society itself realized that it didn't have a snowball's chance in hell of entering into the mainstream conversation. But now, 24, 25 years later, see, that is exactly what has happened. One thing I can think of there is there's a trend towards authoritarianism, and there's great insecurity, instability. I'm wondering if that has anything to do with it, because it seems to me to be a Christian, you have to make yourself vulnerable, because that's what love is, isn't it? It's vulnerability. You can be hurt, and if you don't want that to happen, perhaps it's safer just to what they believe to be the safer option. I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
Oh, I think what you're saying rings so true. I was just listening to a video by Monsignor Shea about traditionalism and progressivism, and he compared that the body of Christ has an immune system. He said, it's a body, and it has the capacity to take into itself disease and contamination and to work out a remedy and to conquer it. And he said the antibodies that the body produces are the saints, and they flow through the bloodstream and purify the body of disease and illness. Like they help the body grow beyond. And we know that the church can do that because of Christ's promises that he would be with us, and that Peter would keep the faith, and the faith would not fail, and the Holy Spirit would guide the church. And so we know that we don't have to be afraid of the illnesses and the diseases that come in and out of the body, because the church always can come through on the other side, even though it's hard getting there. And the antibodies, they have to be right in the thick of it, helping to fight that out. And you can't, if you hold yourself off on one side or in one part of the body and say, well, I'll keep away from the germs and they won't get me, and then I'll be safe, I won't have anything to worry about. But you're also hiding from the suffering of that process, and you're also withholding the good that you could contribute to the healing of the body. And so I thought that was such an excellent analogy. And it is so tempting, because there's so much fear motivating people, and they want to be good. They're drawn to the security of traditionalism, like you've pointed out, and the assurances in the black and white and the very definite lines and the dogmatic preaching, and priests who can tell them do this or don't do that, and they can kind of just surrender their consciences to that and feel like, now I don't have to worry anymore. And it seems like such a just add water kind of fix, but it's not that simple. I mean, it's an adventure. It's a risky adventure. You have to engage in this relationship, and relationships, like you just said, you have to be vulnerable. If you aren't vulnerable, then you're not really in union. And that's what it's all about, is union with God at the end. So how can you hold yourself back and expect to get to union with God? It's like, that's like the Catholic argument against contraception. One of them is that you're withholding your fertility from the act. You're like, I give you all of myself, but not this part. And so it's a lie. So how can you live your faith that way with God?
That's beautiful. Yeah. Hadn't heard that analogy about the immunity.
I was just going to ask about you were 12 years with the society, and so you made it through all seminary, and you commented in one of your articles. I was kind of reading through some of those. They were just so good. I felt very consoled reading some of your articles, because sometimes in my mind, and where I'm drawn in my own like post-trad path, I think, am I just going over the edge? Am I drawing conclusions that are just crazy? But some of your own thoughts were very, like, really resonated with me. And so that was encouraging to me. I'm like, okay, I'm not totally like losing it because you've been there, like totally in the thick of it on the inside, and you saw, the formation, but you mentioned it was lacking in certain ways. And now you can kind of look back on that, and you've known other priests from different places and different formations. And I'm curious, maybe if you could talk about that a little bit, and how you feel it could have been better, what you noticed was lacking, or that you'd wished you'd had in your own formation.
Overall, there was no soul to it. It was, these are the things you have to learn. These are the things you have to be able to do. And there was no sort of, looking back, there was no like cohesion, explanation of why you had to do it. God, obviously. That was kind of lacking. There was sort of a self-obsession about everything. I mean, the truths they were defending, they were doing exactly that. They were defending them. They weren't preaching them. They weren't sharing them. It was like, this certain proposition is correct because blah, 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 blah. But I mean, there's no purpose to it. It was just, this is the way things are.
Right.
This is what you must believe. But why? Why? It wasn't really, you study the documents of Vatican II, or the encyclicals and other teaching tools, the popes after Vatican II. It was all, they just had their own talking points.
Mm-hmm.
This is kind of like, this is what Archbishop Lefebvre said. There was a cult of Archbishop Lefebvre. I should have cottoned on at the time when the seminary. I thought, all this talk about Archbishop Lefebvre this, Archbishop Lefebvre that, seems a bit sus to me. But it was all kind of the brainwashing. And for an organization so big on the liturgy, there wasn't actually a whole lot of liturgy study. I remember we were left to our own devices to learn even how to celebrate the Mass.
Wow.
There were no classes. We had to celebrate it in our own time. There was no pastoral theology course. We weren't really told how to hear a confession. That was And that was a really important thing. Again, we were told the basics. This is what you have to do to hear a valid confession. They enunciate so all their mortal sins that they can remember. You give them the penance. You announce the required formula. And that was basically it.
Wow.
So it was all rather, trying to find the word.
Well, it sounds kind of utilitarian.
Utilitarian, exactly.
Wow.
And again, that's what Andrew says again in this book. Traditionalism is very utilitarian, rather like the what the church was becoming before Vatican II. Because he mentions something which I had never really thought of before. Yes, that the practice of the faith had been reduced to these things that you have to do in order to avoid sin. There's no, the reason is, why are we doing this?
Right. Did you feel a lot of anxiety, like in your time with the society? Did you feel like this underlying kind of pressure, or like the fear motivation, or urgency, or like the crisis? Like, did that kind of give you some kind of negative energy that what you were aware of during your time there?
Yes, it did. The crisis, and basically we were the only things stopping complete disaster. So there's that enormous pressure, and as you would have experienced too, the lay people felt that too. You know, if things are going to hell in hell baskets, it's because you're not praying enough, or you're not saying enough rosaries, or you're not devout enough at mass. And it was all very negative. And all the homilies, nothing joyful, nothing positive about it. It's all, gloom and doom. And like, joyful. You've got the faith. There.
Right.
Nothing like that. Yeah.
You said in all your 5 years of active priesthood in the society, you witnessed one marriage, and how many like baptisms or receptions of adults into the society? Do you remember?
Received one adult into the society. She had been an Anglican. Yes, she was a lovely lady. How many baptisms? Just 2 or 3.
Wow.
Not very many. No.
Wow.
Yeah, it certainly wasn't a growing movement.
Yeah.
Very isolated movement.
Yeah.
Those people that were interested, they'd come from what they called the Novus Ordo. I don't like that term, the Novus Ordo. It sounds like, coming from a sect, which is of course what they mean. They instantly felt very uncomfortable, and if they stayed, they tended to be ostracized because they didn't think like the others.
Right.
It got to be just weird too. Like I remember a couple of years before I left, I had to deal with this rumor going around that the world was going to end in the year 2000. Because some supposed seer had said it sometime. And it was around the time when I was beginning to become more aware of myself. And I was telling people, why are you telling people the world's going to end in 2000? You have no idea.
We know not the day nor the hour, but we know the year.
Exactly.
No, I remember that too. Y2K, getting ready for the big crash and whatever, and storing up
Yes.
beans and bottled water in our basement, and just being like, we don't know what's going to happen.
Oh, yes.
I
That
don't
was
know
an
where that came from.
anticlimax. That was an anticlimax, wasn't
Oh, no.
it? Oh dear. Just looking back on it, it seems so weird. So did you grow up with traditionalist parents, or
I was brought up in the church, in the mainstream church, so I never even saw a 1962 mass until I was like 15. And when I did, I kind of thought it was weird. And then we kind of kept going back, because we're not ones to give up easily. We're like, well, we'll just keep trying and see if we can correct this and see what's, all the hubbub about it. And then I kind of got hooked on it and thought, oh, this is it. Everything I've had before now is so inane and watered down, and I've been robbed. And so I just really globbed onto the ideology of it, even though most of the time I was going to the Reformed Mass with my family. And so I never actually belonged to a traditionalist parish, but I did acquire a spiritual director from the FSSP, and he directed me for like 6 or 7 years. And so through that, I had a steady exposure to, homilies of trad priests and his guidance, and telling me, what I needed to read and what I didn't, and what was and wasn't important, or, was and wasn't full of error in the church. And, put certain things in a suspicious light, like the Vatican II documents and the catechism of the 2000 catechism, and all these things. I was like, wow, I thought these things were fine, and like I'd studied them before and gotten benefit out of them, and now I guess I need to kind of ignore them because they're not important, or they're actually could be harmful. And so I really got swallowed up in that. But it was also getting to know more people from our local SSPX community through a book group that I had going, and other people that were attending the diocesan masses like I was, but they were very much proponents of the 1962 mass. And they were just so critical and negative, and ready to put one thing down in order to build another thing up that they judged was better. And I saw some basically manifestations in my interactions with these people that woke me up to what I was becoming, and that I was going to end up like them. I was going to end up outside the church and looking down at everything that had blessed me my whole life up until that point. And I just realized my ingratitude and the cold-heartedness that was creeping into me. And I kind of shocked me out of it. And I stepped back, and I did retain some good effects of things that I learned during that time, that like books I read or things I might not have been exposed to otherwise. But there was so much else to sift out that was unwholesome, and I'm still unpacking that now. And it's so the trad recovery ministry, like it ministers to me too, because I'll be talking to people and have these realizations, or hit on some internal reaction that I still have to something as negative or condescending, and I'll realize, wait a second, like that's from the bad old days. Like I don't think God wants me to have that attitude. That's not building me up. It's not building up my neighbor. It's not drawing me closer to God. And so at least I knew what I could go back to that was going to nourish me. But I'm afraid if I'd been raised trad, like totally enmeshed, that I would never have seen that and been able to extricate myself, because like you say, the brainwashing is real, and you feel so assured that you're in the one right place and you can't leave because there's nowhere to go, or you'll lose your soul and let everybody down. Like the world depends on you. I mean, that's like burnout right there. And so many people do leave the church completely, leave off all practice of religion because of that oppressive burden. And I've heard like that priests in the SSPX specifically, I heard a number, but I don't know how to verify this, but that they typically last only about 3 to 5 years on average before they just burn out and have to be retired from ministry, or they just walk out. And I don't know if you could speak to that, but you already were saying you felt this constant like burden and this driving negative energy because of the crisis and stuff. Like, how do you sustain that? And so much depends on you. Like, It's impossible for a human to bear the burden of being the savior of the world. Like, we had Jesus. He's the Redeemer. Why do we all have to take that all on ourselves? It's unreal.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I saw a lot of that. There were some priests talented priests too, who were full of zeal and said, "It's all up to me." And as you say, before long, they've burnt out, they've left, or they've run away with a parishioner's wife, have left religion altogether. Yeah, it happens, as you say, quite a lot. And some just get mentally a wreck, and there's no support for them. There's no recognition that there's something that they are doing this to them. Before I was leaving, I was entering that stressful moment because everything was just falling down on top of me. Priests were regarded as sacrament making machines. That was it. So, again, no soul. Your job is, your job is to provide the sacraments for these people. And if they don't have the sacraments, they're in danger, and they'll danger of falling into hell and all that. It was so bad that you would every week you would have priests flying, particularly in the United States, flying an hour or two just to say mass in a chapel and then come back the following day. New Zealand is a pretty big country, 2 islands, and one day there were usually 3 priests there on the island, but at this time there was only 2. And my prior, he said, "I'm going to stay in Wanganui, the headquarters, and you're going to have to do everything else." Which means I was flying to 10 mass centres across the length of New Zealand.
What?
And then I did that again the next week. And by the time I was finished, I had arrived and I was holding my suitcase and I was just in complete daze. And somebody greeted me and I dropped the suitcase. I just physically didn't have the strength to carry it. It was, and just trying to concentrate saying the mass. Why I didn't, it was just a blur. It was just a matter of just wrote. So yeah, there's that. Yeah, as you say, there's the pressure of everything. Everything falls upon me, which is not the way it is at all. Yeah. As you say, Jesus has done everything before us. When I discovered the site where Peter is and Mike Lewis, a wonderful chap, I thought I'd try writing a couple of articles. They might get rejected, they might not. I'm happy they did get accepted. Yeah. It took me a long time to do that because you were talking about unpacking the whole traditionalism thing once you leave and how long it takes. And it did take me a long time. It was only till about 20 so years later I thought, right, I'm ready now to do something about it. I feel sufficiently strong within myself to do something about it. No, it's all right, though. All right, the book one day, I don't know. But I'm grateful for people like you. There isn't a network like there is in the United States in Australia because it's not such a big thing. It doesn't have the impact here that it seems to have in the United States now. But as you were saying, you also take positive things out of it too. Okay, you develop, I suppose, critical thinking, you develop ability to analyze, you develop empathy with other people. I've kept the interest in theology, philosophy. I'm not a very good theologian. I'm not a theologian at all. Where Peter is, there's a lovely nun. You probably know her, Sister Gabriella of the Incarnation. You know her?
No, I haven't met her yet.
She's on the comments page. She rings around me. Philosophy and theology. She's Carmelite nun.
Ooh, Carmelites. I have a soft spot for them. Yes. I'll have to look her up now. I wondered, I found your letter that you wrote. I think it was to your district before you left. Yeah, and I read that and posted on my channel because it was just so good. I thought you made so many good points in there, and I wondered, was that really hard for you to write and send, or did you feel relieved doing that?
Well, I felt relieved when I actually made the decision. Everything became easy. Just like this, I guess, this pent up adrenaline and I suppose a little bit of outrage too was coming out, and it just kind of just flowed out. The time it was a matter. For me, it felt like something I just had to do. There was no alternative. I would have tweaked that letter a little bit if I had written it. Well, obviously now I wouldn't have written it, would I? But if I'd been writing it later, in my present state, I've tweaked it a little bit, like when I say I might pine for the society. I never have, never. Sort of left away with a bit of bitterness, no sorrow at all. But all that bitterness is gone. But talking about speaking with people and the clergy in your parish, how welcoming they are, how kind and warm they are. And that's what I discovered everywhere. And I thought, this is the spirit of the Catholic Church. This is what it should be about. And of course, of course, there are people who don't believe the Catechism to the letter, or they don't understand the Catechism to the letter. There'd be clergy who make up part of the Mass as they go along, of course. But look what's in their heart. Yeah, they're warm, they're accepting, and they understand what Christianity, religion is all about. It's wonderful. And as to the liturgy, here in Australia, I'm sure it's the same in America and possibly all across the world. There was the liturgies are becoming more, according to the book, according to the instructions, right there, and they do it that way. It's always very beautiful.
I'm grateful for that people are finally getting to see the fruits of the renewal, but it's just been a turbulent time, but that's totally precedented in history. And that's, if you study history, then you can see that and understand our own time for what it is and not be scandalized and, scattered.
Well, exactly. I mean, back in the 4th century, when the Council of Nicaea, they drew up the Nicene Creed and defined that Jesus was the Son of God. Just a few years down the track, Christianity was Arian. That happens every time there's a council. There's always a counter reaction to it.
Yeah.
always sort of a punch in the face back, but it all evens out in the end. I remember, I forget where I was reading it, but this author was saying that we have not yet seen the Vatican Council fully implemented, because we have spent so much energy just combating the reaction, and now things are starting to settle down. We can actually, that's what Pope Francis is doing now. We can focus back to the Vatican Council and look at what it was saying, and you got synod and synodality, and yeah, I really love the way Pope Francis is going. I know he has a lot of detractors, but I just don't understand him.
I think that's so true. Yeah,
Yeah.
we have so much information available to us and bouncing around in our heads that we equate that with understanding and true knowledge, but it's not the same. And it's not even always accurate information. I mean, how much of the information you take in can you actually verify whether it's true or not, especially about things that are going on completely outside of your realm of acquaintance or influence? It's really kind of unreal.
The interesting thing about Francis too is he's the first pope who was trained during the time of Vatican II.
Interesting.
He was ordained in when was he ordained? I think he was ordained in 1970. And then even in some of the things which people think are more controversial, all he's doing is applying those principles of the past to present situations. Everybody's made such a big fuss of he wants divorced people to receive communion. Well, actually, he didn't say that. What he did say, if there is there a pastoral situation in which you could give a divorced person communion? And the church has always been sensitive to those kinds of special situations. He's just applying that.
Yeah.
Anyway, we live in interesting times.
Yes. If you just have faith, and trust that God is big enough. I read a quote in one of your articles. It was so good. I sent it to my mom when you said traditionalists construct small boxes and try to stuff God into them. When they realize that he won't fit, they make God small enough to be contained. Oh, man. I think that's really powerful to just think about that, because I've seen so many examples of that. And it's like the largeness of God is frightening. It doesn't seem safe. It's kind of like C.S. Lewis's Aslan and the Chronicles of Narnia, where they say, yeah, it's like he's not a tame lion, he's wild. And the kids are like, oh, should we be scared of him? And they're like, well, like you might feel a little afraid, but he's good. And yes. But at the same time, you can't predict him. You can't box him in.
Absolutely beyond everything. I mean, him in the liturgy. He's not contained by doctrine. He's not contained by people. He's just not contained by situations, which is how I came to understand a lot of Vatican II. When he's saying Vatican II says elements of the truth are shared by all religions. They're shared by all human experience. There's truth in every human experience. That's all the Vatican Council was saying. He wasn't saying, you can go and become a Buddhist and you'll be saved. That's not what he's saying. It's saying God is everywhere in every situation, and you should not limit him. Not even limit him by calling him him. It's
Yeah.
Just utterly transcendent. Bottles of wine. We're not supposed to understand, so don't even try.
Right.
Mm.
No, it's good to not be afraid to be intimidated by God as he is, because that will inhibit our personal encounter with him, which he desires. And I feel like in traditionalism, the themes I noticed, they placed God pretty removed from the individual. Like, oh, well, you're supposed to seek him and, do mental prayer and do all these things. But at the same time, he's so far above you and he's kind of scary. And, like, don't presume, don't get too familiar because, it's not okay. And but that was all man-made construct telling you, how you couldn't approach God and what he wanted from you. And it's like, when did God ever actually say that? When does the magisterium ever, give that impression? Well, it's just not there. It's actually the contrary is there. And then even, our Lord's own similes about the church is the bride and he is the bridegroom. And, it's like, oh, okay, well, there's no barriers there. There's no boundaries. And so why are we putting these up? Because we don't think it's appropriate to be that close and that familiar with God. Like, we have such a poor opinion of ourselves. Like, we think we've ruined ourselves by our sins and that, somehow we've impacted how lovable we are, that we're like, oh God, you couldn't love me. You couldn't come that close to me. No, please just stay over there. Why would we do that? We're nuts.
Exactly. It's not like God is here and we have to go up. It's like we're down here and God comes. He's there already. It's extraordinary. And about being familiar with God, I would love to be in that stage of the relationship like Teresa of Avila. You probably know the story. She was riding along and her mule threw her and she fell in the mud. She said, he said to God, if that's how you treat your friends, no wonder you don't have any.
Oh, she was so great. How could he not love that? He made her that way. He made her sassy. I mean, she was living up to that. I would wonder if you have any words for those people who are unpacking their trad experiences and maybe how you experience maybe different phases in the last 20 years or so. And if you could kind of give some voice to encouragement or what to expect or things that helped you in your process and like how other people were a support to you and how we can learn from that.
All right. I guess it's like going through the stages of grief or something like that. Go through the different stages. What have I lost? How am I going to go on? Might feel angry with yourself for having allowed yourself to go in that situation. You might feel despair because you can't see anything to go along to. But as we were talking about, you just have to hold on to that thought. God is not up there like traditionalist mentors have told you. He's here, standing beside you. Well, not only that, you're on his shoulders. And that's a hard enough thing, I think, for anybody to be aware of all the time. But keep being aware of that. Keep close to your friends and find some mentors, like people like yourself, somebody to walk yourself through it. Confessor, perhaps. You will get to the other side, and what you find will be incredibly richer than you've ever experienced before. And the wonderful thing is that experience just gets richer and richer and richer. That's what I'm finding. I'd like to think, I hope so, that my relationship with God is becoming richer and deeper. It's like we were talking about, you can reduce everything to God is love. What was coming out from the society and with all these spiritual issues, it's not just the liturgy and the discipline and all that. It's the spirituality. It's your relationship with God. Who is God to you? It took me a very long time. In fact, I only completely realized this 4 years ago. Is don't ask yourself, what can I do for God? Because the answer is nothing. And we know that. The whole experience of our lives is I can do nothing to make myself more pleasing to God. So you have to let God into your life and let God do everything. We don't realize what that actually means in concrete terms until we let him do it. And when we realize that God is love, that's who he is, and you just let love be your guide, which, as we know, is the hardest thing to do, especially in the little things, and just let that take the life. And and this is important too, I think, if you fail, if you make a mistake, it doesn't matter, because in their past experiences, they would have that big thing would be for them, you failed because you didn't do this, you didn't pray enough, you didn't go to confession enough times, that kind of thing. It doesn't matter. Because God does not care. He cares about us having a relationship with us, and that relationship overcomes those faults. And those faults make us humbler and more trusting. And it all comes.
So much to look forward to, so
Yes.
to help people over that bump of the sacrifice that they might be making to walk away from this community they've known, or this ideology and expression of their faith, and especially if they've never known anything else, that is a big deal. It is scary, but it's not a wasted effort, and there's so much good reason to move forward past that, and that God is saving so much good for you on the other side. You can trust in that.
Yes. Yes. As you say, it is hard for some of them. They may be leaving their families too.
Yeah. Where was your family in all of this? I'm curious.
No, they weren't Catholics, so they had absolutely no idea. They just didn't understand it at all. But my mother did suffer from it, and I much regret this, because I went to New Zealand and separated from her, and sort of mentally, philosophically separated from her too, and it was very hard for her. But when we came back, we reestablished that relationship, and a very healthy relationship, till she died 10 years ago.
Oh.
And she recovered her faith before she died too.
Oh.
It was a lovely thing.
Wow, that's awesome. I was just curious because I haven't met many laicized priests. I did meet one years ago, and actually his wife, he had been laicized and married, but his wife veiled. They were really lovely people. And gosh, it was just so interesting talking to him about how he had ended up kind of getting funneled, into seminary and through the priesthood and ordained and stuff, kind of like everybody around him was like, oh yeah, you should do this. And so he went through with it, but kind of nobody really ever sat down and was like, is God actually calling you to this? Do you feel convicted? they just, everything looked okay, so they just pushed him through, and then he was just, priesting away, and then after a few years he's realizing, I don't belong here. This is not my calling, and like kind of like felt guilt from that, and leaving the priesthood to be laicized, and then marrying later. It was kind of strange for him, and he said he missed, like, sometimes he felt very lonely for his life as a priest and being able to celebrate the sacraments and things. Like, it was a real sacrifice to walk away, but he felt like he had to do it because he felt like it wasn't really for him, and he shouldn't indulge, if you will, that he would be doing something wrong by forcing himself on the religious life like that. And but then it's like, but he's still a priest, and he'll always be a priest even though he's not active. And he chose to get married, but not everyone does. And I don't know, I just that's got to be kind of hard. Or maybe you just feel like you're sort of the odd man out sometimes because of that. Like, you're not really a lay person, but you're not a functioning priest. And, like, I don't know. I mean, what's that like? How is that?
For a time bit, it was hard. Yeah. Giving all that up. And yeah, for a long time it'd feel a bit odd, just like that. I'm no longer acting as a priest, but am I going to be judged according to a priest? No, you're not going to. So, but yeah. Well, I could understand that too. If you're married too, it would be difficult. Yeah, it used to be though. If you were ordained, you could never be laicized. You might be sent to a monastery or something for the rest of your life, but
right,
or relaxed. And I think it's a good thing, but as you say, some people just get ordained and they don't have a vocation. But I was listening to a priest homily the other day, lovely priest, get on with him very well. He said, I'm about 85 now, and sometimes I ask myself, do I have a vocation?
So honest. Oh man.
Yes. There's a little niggling doubts. That's the other beautiful thing. Everybody has little niggling doubts about something. And it doesn't matter. Just let life happen. And just let God guide you and see what happens.
Oh,
that's a wonderful thing.
It was such a good, so great to talk to you. And I just
likewise.
I appreciate everything you shared. And yeah, it's a big deal to put yourself out there and to share anything. And I know that you'll give people a lot of food for thought and also encouragement. So thank you.
And all the best to you, and thank you for what you're doing for all these people.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, I hope we can work together more. And
thank you, Laura. It's been lovely talking to you, meeting you.
Thank you. Yeah, you too. All right. Well, God bless you and enjoy the rest of your Tuesday, and I'll go to bed Monday.
Yes. All right. God bless you.
Thank you. Bye.